Why, hello there. A lot of people commented and said, you gotta read Berserk. And yeah, I always wanted to, but it's been going on since the 80s, and I just thought, man, it's so long. And then I looked and I said, oh, it's only 300 some chapters. That's not that bad. So finally I said, okay, yeah, I will read Berserk. Why not? I thought it would be fun to check in certain landmarks on what I think is going on and how I'm feeling about it. Going into Berserk, I only knew it was about this really strong guy who basically fights demons with a sword. And I wasn't that off, it seems. That seems to be the general gist of it. So I've read 103-ish chapters. Casca just got raped by Griffith in his new form in this hellish world. And Guts had to watch. Woof. The first thing I have to say about this manga is, wow. Is it violent? Is it gory? Is it just full of sex and nudity? And it doesn't hold back one tiny bit. There's so many panels that I couldn't even put up and blur because the whole thing is just... what sticks out to me is this guy that Guts just recently fought where he massacred the people that helped him and he put their torsos on sticks and threw their heads at Guts. I mean, holy frickin' moly. I have to say the art is really, really good. It's like top notch, some of the best I've seen. I will tell you, I was quite surprised that the manga starts and he meets up with this fairy or elf or whatever it is, and he kills the big fat king guy, and then you see Griffith, who that's the first time we see him, and he gets attacked by these demons, and then the story flashes back. Well, this whole time I'm reading, I'm like, okay, we're gonna get back to the future? We're gonna get back to the future? And no, we're not. It was a very interesting narrative choice to start and then go back and then stay back for a long ass time. I can only imagine that was several years. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I was just very surprised by this narrative choice. What it does do that's good though is now it's setting up the stakes. Because now that I'm seeing this whole hellish landscape, it's like, okay, this is going to end up being Guts versus Griffith in the end, I'm sure. And so now it's like, wow, the two who were previously best friends, tragic, now they're going to have to fight each other. Great setup. Right now, I see Griffith as quite a tragic character, but interestingly, not in a obvious way, because obviously he is not someone you're supposed to root for or should root for. In fact, he's presented as a ruthless guy who would do anything to accomplish his dreams. But what's interesting is when Guts wanted to leave the Hawks, the tragic element is that Griffith had everything lined up on his chessboard. He was in check. But then he couldn't handle the emotional impact of Guts wanting to leave him. And so he made a crucial error and ended with, the tortured form that he became, which, when you think about it, what choice did he have at that point? To either ascend and become one of the demon kings or whatever they are, or stay in this pathetic form. He really didn't have much of a choice. So in that regard, he's a tragic figure because he had it. But then he lost it. I'm not entirely sure that being the Demon King isn't what he wanted all along. I don't know, maybe it is, but it seems that he was going to become the king by marrying the princess, and he had that, and he blew it because he overreacted because of Guts. So does Guts have some blame to shoulder? No, because Guts can make his own decision, but that's something that he can harbor in himself. We'll see. I'm 100 chapters through. So that's what I'm thinking right now. Overall, I would say it's really freaking good. And I love that the author sort of really has this long-term vision, obviously, and is implementing it that way. These chapters of Guts in Hell and the whole Hawk squad getting decimated and Casca getting raped. I mean, wow. It's really starting to get good now. That's it. That's my report for now for Berserk. I'll be back soon. Berserk update. I've read now about 215-ish chapters. Since my last update when I started reading it, the author of Berserk passed away. Rest in peace to him. I just think, wow, what timing. I start this thing, and like a week later, the author dies. Terrible. So that's pretty sad that we're not going to get to see him realize the ending of his work, but hopefully somebody will have his notes and be able to finish it up for him, and at least we can get a proper ending. It seems we've gotten quite a bit of ways from Guts versus Griffith. We had this arc of the little girl who became like a flying insect, and she thought she was an elf. I wasn't really into that arc so much. I thought, it's okay. Then there was the arc of the Inquisition. But I have to say, I really was impressed by the author's correct use of torture devices. Historically accurate. When the wheel came out, I was like, oh wow, he's actually using the wheel. And some of these other things, I just was like, wow, he did his research. He didn't make that up. This was good. Now, hold on. If you're interested in learning more about torture devices and other methods of torture, I highly recommend this book called The Big Book of Pain. This is a great book, and it really teaches you a lot about history and the dark side of history, which is what I am currently a fan of. Casca is kind of a little annoying at this point, how stupid she is. I get it, she was traumatized. But I think that her whole setup and the whole backstory of her and Guts makes it very clear why he protects her so much and why it's so important to him. Otherwise, as a reader, you'd be like, what are you doing? Kind of like in Gantz when Kay was protecting his girlfriend, and we're all rolling our eyes the whole time, being like, oh my God, will someone kill this girl already? Will she ever return to her normal state? I don't know. We'll see. I'd have no spoilers ahead of me, so I don't know what's coming. I think with this manga, probably more than any others, the picture that's being painted in my mind of what's going on is a lot more detailed, I think, than any other manga I've read, really. And I think that's because the landscapes and the backgrounds and everything is so detailed that it allows the picture that formulates in your mind to be so full of detail. And I'm just like, wow. We'll see where it goes, and I'll report back in. Chapter 310. Almost there. I think there's about 50 more chapters to go. The biggest thing that sticks out to me, it seems that Griffith is now coming back. And the interesting thing about Griffith is that we don't hear him really speak anymore. We don't really get his inner thoughts, his perspective on anything. So what's really going on there? Is he just like a mindless deity that's just sort of enacting the will of Griffith, and he's not actually Griffith anymore? Or the author just wants to conceal what he's thinking and saying, and maybe that will be revealed at a later time? I don't know. I happen to find Griffith to be the more interesting part of the whole story, so I'm glad to see him coming back. I like that Guts is now on a team of total misfits, and every adventure he goes on, he adds more people to his team, and they're like a total joke compared to the Hawk. Now, if we didn't know from Guts' perspective what Griffith had done before and all the people that he had betrayed, we would think that Griffith was the savior, that he was the good guy, like everybody else in the world seems to think. In some ways, it's interesting because it's like Griffith, right now, he is the hero, but only Guts knows that he's not. It's like Guts is always in his way. If you take Guts out of the picture, Griffith probably would have had an easy time enacting everything he wanted to do. But thanks to Guts, he now has godlike powers. But other than that, Farnese, whatever her name is, I like her character a lot. How many lives did she destroy through torture and other means? I mean, that's an interesting thing to think about. Griffith destroyed a lot of lives, and so did Farnese. Farnese gets a pass for what she's done, but Griffith doesn't, just because Guts knew those people personally and was personally affected by that. So that's an interesting thing to think about. I didn't think about that till literally just right now. We'll see what happens. I like Wizard Girl. I like the goofiness of the new team that Guts has going on. I know it's not going to come to a conclusion, but I hope that the author left some notes. We'll get into that in the next part. All right, that's it. I'm going to go read the next 50 chapters, and then I will see you at the end of the tunnel. Hello everyone, I finished, I did it, I made it to the end. Truthfully, I made it to the end a month ago, but I just didn't have time to set up the camera and finish talking about it. So, I really liked the whole process of getting Casca's memories back. I thought that was kind of a fun arc there. Things seem to really start to be picking up, and of course, that's where it ends. As a creative myself, I think what would terrify me, and I imagine would terrify a lot of people, is to die before your work is completed. Now, I think this is a little different because he's essentially been releasing his work throughout his life. So it's not as if he's working on it, and then we'll release it. So his work has been released, just not fully to the end. I'm sure that there are people who know where this was going. And he must have left notes or had at least a rough idea of how it's all going to pan out, especially because it seems to me it's towards the end of the series. I would think maybe there's 2 more big arcs and then it would end. We're at least 3/4 of the way there. If there is a roadmap to the end, I think the people that he worked on this with should pick up the mantle and finish it. I know a lot of people feel otherwise and say, oh, this is his work, it should die with him, and that's very poetic and romantic, but me personally, I would like to see it completed and finished, and I imagine that most artists would want that as well. Right now, it's an incomplete work, and I would still recommend Berserk based on the iconicness of it. It is iconic, it is sort of emblematic of manga in general, but it feels like something's missing without an ending. However, looking at Attack on Titan, maybe that's for the best. I feel like most people would assume there's a Guts Griffith battle on the horizon. And I wonder if perhaps the author would have taken it in a different direction. I wonder if there is room for Griffith to have redemption, actual redemption, where he makes up for what has happened and maybe becomes a good guy and maybe fights with Guts once again. And truly, you can't look at Griffith and say that you wouldn't have done the same if you were in his position of having no use of your body whatsoever. Would you sacrifice your friends for that? I mean, I guess it depends who you are and how much you care. Maybe at that point, death would be a better option. I do recognize its status as a masterpiece, but it's just not my favorite as a manga. The only real fault I can find in it is it has a very dramatic shift in tone. Whereas I mentioned earlier, I was like, wow, this is so dark and so graphic and so bloody. And later on, it sort of almost becomes like this PG-13 buddy comedy with the little boy and Guts' ragtag group, and all of the gore and the realism violence just sort of is gone. And I can't fault it too much for that because this is a work that has been produced over 30 years. And I imagine over 30 years, you are going to personally change and your directives, your bosses are going to change and tell you you can't be writing this way and that way. So I can't fault it too much for that, but that would be my only real knock on the story. So that's it. That's my experience with Berserk. I hope you enjoyed my journey along this. Thank you to everybody who encouraged me to read it and see through my naivete of not having done so. If there's anything else that I should read like this that I have not, that I'm a fool for not doing so, please let me know. Otherwise, thank you for being here. Have a wonderful evening. Please like and subscribe, and we will have some more fun in the future. Goodbye.